Radio Cosmik, Radio Cosmik, Radio Cosmik.
The sound of small birds chirping drifted in along with the cold air arriving on a current from an open window. It still felt very much like being in the heart of a long winter that had to be passed through to reach a return of natural warmth. I was lying in bed listening to the sounds of the world, which sounded absent of any human noise, and tried to remember how I had found myself in this place. I noticed the walls were thick wooden beams that creaked in the gaps of the cold air moving through. I got up to look out the window and expected to see the churning waves of the ocean, but instead saw a long green valley of pine trees being silently sprinkled with falling snow. I opened the wooden door to step outside and instantly felt how cold it was, with my breath forming an evaporating cloud in front of me. I shivered in the realization I was only wearing a jumper, trousers and socks. The earth was damp from the snow that was slowly forming in patches, but I walked out a few feet to take in the vast view of the green, brown and white landscape that filled in a plunging V to the horizon. I couldn't see any other buildings, and the silence began to disturb me. But there were bird sounds and the low wind that convinced me, along with my damp feet, that I wasn't dreaming or dead. I watched a lone figure appear along a sloping path, dressed in green and white camouflage, who was winding his way upwards towards the lodge I had awoken in. He had a rifle with a telescopic sight hung from his shoulder, and I thought he was the image of a hunter but was carrying no game. He slowly and steadily made his way towards me, and I didn't move as I waited. I was sure he had seen me, and I thought I must have some explanation. Would it have made more sense to make a mad dash and run and hide, or go back inside the building I had awoken in? I felt no sense of threat, only a calm curiosity. When the figure came into level view, perhaps some 20 feet away, he loosened the white hood to reveal a bearded face that locked his eyes on me. I returned the gaze and didn't move. Neither of us nodded our heads or smiled in some signal of friendliness to a stranger. I merely waited for his approach and wondered what he would do or say, as if I wasn't really in my body but watching a scene play out. He stopped a few feet away from me and took off black leather gloves to expose his hands. He rubbed them together and blew on them as he tucked his gloves away. He held up his right hand with his fingers spread apart and said, "How?" I mirrored the signal and said, "How? Let's go inside and light the fire," he said, and cracked a minor smile. "You'll need to dry your socks." The hunter placed his weapon by the door and pulled off his white layer of clothes to reveal his practical brown garments, and quickly relit the fire in the small fireplace that had been smouldering and was almost extinguished. He pulled off his boots and placed them in front of the flame's heat, and pulled out a small silver flask to take a quick swig and offered it to me. I nodded and accepted a drink, to find a burning, spicy taste of brandy wake me up. I remember Emily was showing me her memories somehow, and then I found myself here. I offered to break the ice and see what was returned, wondering who might be perceived to be mad. "Yes, she brought you here. You don't remember more?" he asked with a slight accent I couldn't identify. "No, that's all." "It's to be expected. Don't worry. We get warm and talk. Call me Mama Jack. Tell me, do you remember The Simpsons?" "The cartoon?" I replied in confusion, as it was the least expected thing I imagined the rugged face of the stranger to say in that moment. "Yes, the cartoon of the yellow people. You remember them?" "Yes." Do you remember how many fingers they had? I don't know, 3 or 4? I tried to recall what they had looked like, but felt lost as I was still taking in my new surroundings. 4. They had 4. And why was that? Do you know? He looked at me and didn't blink until I responded. I don't know, is it easier to draw? Yes. But that is not why. You see this? He held up his 5 fingers spread out for me to see. We have 5. It is a hint, a clue, information for us to notice, to discover about our reality. We live in a 3D world. We do not perceive the other dimensions, but they exist. We perceive we can move in 3D, but we are also aware that there is space and time. So we know there are more dimensions. We have 5 fingers because our consciousness exists in the 5th dimension and streams into this realm. You understand? I think so, but what does a cartoon have to do with this? The cartoon tells us that the images we are looking at on a TV exist on a 2D plane, but the creator of the image, the cartoonist, exists in the 3D world and is creating from the 4th dimension where his imagination resides. So the characters have 4 fingers. It is a joke, yes. A hint, yes. You understand? When I saw you, I showed you my hand. You count 5 fingers, yes? Yes. I nodded again at his insistence. This is how Indians, native people, would greet one another. They would show they are human. They would say, how, and display 5 fingers. That they were alike, that they were not ancient ones from before the flood. They were not the descendants of Nephilim with 6 fingers. You understand? I understand I have 5 fingers and you have 5 fingers, but I'm not sure about anything else. I replied and laughed. He got up to set a cooking pot over the open fire and began busying himself with vegetables and meat that had been laid aside. It is okay, we eat, gather our strength. We will make sense of things, more things will come to light in the darkness, Mama Jack said as he looked out the window on the last glimmers of the setting sun that was rapidly bringing the daylight to an end. My wet socks gradually steamed themselves dry in front of the fire as the stew slowly cooked, and I felt myself happily go into a warm trance as I watched the licking flames of the open fire. The heat was like a cosy drug helping me to forget any confusion or worry. I felt an immense relief that I wasn't trapped outside in the wild landscape, and easily put aside the part of my monkey mind that wanted to speculate. I remembered I had drank from Mama Jack's silver flask, and did fleetingly consider the brandy tasted of spice so strongly because it was infused with unknown botanicals. But truly all I wanted in the world was to close my eyes and return to sleep. Perhaps I would dream again of that girl looking out on an island in the sea. Mama Jack quietly went about the lodge, taking things out of cupboards and putting other things away, locking wooden shutters on the windows, lighting candles and moving books and papers about on a small writing desk, and tidying away other documents and maps from a long wooden table so we had free space to eat. He intermittently tasted the stew before sprinkling more unknown herbs and spices into the frothing liquid before declaring it cooked and ready to serve. We silently ate at the table. The warm mix of meat and vegetables felt like it triggered my memory of having a body again. A warm feeling of sustenance flowed through me. I felt instantly relieved and then immediately far more heavy with the feeling of a physical world again. I thought I had been out of my head or above it, and could sense the trickling electrical current of my mind begin to spin like a generator formulating opinions, thoughts and ideas about this new situation, while my body suggested the best thing to do for the evening would be to doze away. I hadn't really noticed how quiet it was until Mama Jack began rooting in a large cupboard that folded out into sections. It looked like a 19th century oak writing desk that had been adapted to hide all his equipment or make it more discreet. He was fiddling with wires and plugging in all his technological gear that was a sudden reminder of the modern age appearing like a lair on top of this rural hideaway that could have been built long ago for hunters in the valley. Mama Jack finally pulled headphones on and began twirling dials through all the invisible frequencies. He patiently moved his attention through the noise in search of something unknown to me. He held up a finger to his lips to suggest I didn't speak when he noticed I was watching his activities. Finally, he unplugged the headphones and plugged in a small speaker so I could hear what he was listening for. It was a strange collage of sounds that hinted at something meaningful becoming comprehensible if one strained the attention of their mind. We listened for several minutes before Mama Jack turned down the volume again. "Are you into ham radio?" I asked as I observed the stranger's face lost in an intense concentration that made him look slightly angry. I thought I had to say something to break the moment open. "Yes, I can broadcast, but if I broadcast, everyone will know where we are. And I cannot allow that now. We wait here until tomorrow and then descend into the hidden valley where there will not be any reception of any frequency. We maintain this lodge as a bridge between their world and ours. I scan in between everything. You understand?" "Somewhere between the long wave and the short wave lies Radio Cosmik," I joked to myself. "You have listened to Radio Cosmik?" Usually lying on the bath, there's some weird piece of music I've never heard before, like Albert Eiler or the Steve Brown Band. "Yes, this is synchronicity, yes." He interrupted my thoughts. "When unknown music enters our ears, when we are in a receptive state, it can open a door in us. We realize there are unprocessed emotions lying beneath the surface. All these energetic feelings lying dormant that are triggered with the emotion of the singer and the music. We feel there is some happiness or sadness or melancholy that was sleeping inside us, and we feel our emotions move the doors of the portal in our heart open, and we feel again what we had denied or refused ourselves to fully know and feel, and now, always in the now, we know again." "What are you seeking in the airwaves?" I asked him. "Comet C 2022 E3 ZTF. Some call it Leonard, yes. The Loch Nar, yes. It is headed towards us, and our duty is to ask, where does it come from? We are told by the technocratic priests it originated in the Oort cloud, and it will pass by the Little Dipper, the place that brings us the Gamma Ursae Mineroid meteor showers. The long tail of a comet is the ultimate ogre for our age." "Do you plan to join us?" I asked. "Would that be so bad?" Mama Jack replied with a scowl. "I will not kill myself, if that is what you mean. I am here to understand, to look out for my tribe, to see what they cannot see. Yes, you understand. I need to know what portends for us. I cannot see into infinity, but I can see through the noise of the event horizon and tell my people if they should stay or go. Others will explain it better when we descend through the valley, and you will see with your own eyes that their hollow men cannot perceive the children of God. Come, try this style and demonstrate the beginner's mind to me." I didn't understand in that moment what was being explained, but believed that it was the hint of something important. I sat beside him at the banks of whirring equipment and radio receiver that looked like something with tube amps from the 1950s, plugged into a sleek grey modern battery bank that I could only guess had been hooked to a solar panel or windmill in the daytime. As its digital lights flickered modernity to me, I rolled the dials and adjusted the volume to escape unpleasant spikes of noise as the random sounds crashed like waves of electricity between meaning and meaningless formations of information that promised an epiphany if one could push beyond apophenia. For a moment a human voice sang through the static, and I smiled in delight to Mama Jack as we heard the crackle of Radio Cosmik broadcasting the song I had been thinking of. The Steve Brown Band's Shine a Light. "So there is a God," I joked. "A God of the airwaves," Mama Jack smiled. "Now we should sleep for our trek tomorrow." "I don't know what I'm letting myself in for," I said with a smile that hid a growing return of clarity at my situation. I felt I was foolishly signalling I was ready to walk right into a cult whom I had no idea what they really believed. Did they think a comet or Oumuamua was really broadcasting to them? Tomorrow I will walk through the valley, Mama Jack said. You can join me and we will reach a settlement where no communication with any outside technocratic signal is possible. You will find Emily there and she can answer questions better than me. Or you can stay here and wait for someone to stumble upon this place in the spring. It is your choice. Now I sleep. Mama Jack unfolded sleeping mats and placed them by the fire. He lay down and instantly closed his eyes as though he had been trained how to sleep quickly in any odd position, situation or circumstance. I lay down and stared at the flames of the fire and imagined faces flickering through the heat. Suddenly I had never felt so tired in my life and let go of any circular paranoid thoughts that kept me attached to the waking world. The next day we left the lodge in the morning with some doubt if we would be walking into worse weather as the snow continued to steadily fall, turning the world into a cold, pristine vision. I was wearing a white balaclava that Mama Jack had offered that kept me snugly warm. My first thought was this some paramilitary initiation being offered. But after being outside in the dropping temperatures for the first hour, I felt a chill in the bones of my face that was unbearable. I was glad to be covered head to foot with proper winter gear as we became slowly moving white silhouettes through the landscape. I thought we must have been hard to spot by any casual observer, but surely any heat-sensing drone or satellite could see us. But I didn't say anything, and Mama Jack said nothing as we walked silently, only occasionally pointing to an obstacle to avoid or climb over. It felt so long since I had been out of the city, the narrow urban and suburban centres that concentrated all life in zones that approximated the life of a sardine in a tin can. Now I was out in the countryside. I felt I was walking through a vast open expanse. The ocean had been the only saving grace of being by the seaside and freeing the mind from a psychic claustrophobia. And now the openness of the natural world with all its myriad life-seeking food was awe-inspiring. I tried to walk in a silent meditation as we crunched through the freezing ground, but my mind was spinning as I stopped in odd moments to look down the valley that ran beyond the horizon. With layers of pine trees, poplars, and the occasional isolated ancient oak tree forming a layer of staggered cover across the earth, we made steady progress, but I had no idea how far we had to go. I realized we were making life more difficult for ourselves by winding along the descending tree line that hid us from the sun and daylight, and presumably anyone watching. I felt like I was learning how to breathe again as I filled my lungs in long breaths. Moving across the irregular ground was a reminder of how rigid it had been to walk on concrete with rubber-soled shoes for so long. I wished I could be in this green place in the summer and walk barefoot. I felt like I was learning how to breathe again as I filled my lungs in long breaths. Moving across the irregular ground was a reminder of how rigid it had been to walk on concrete with rubber-soled shoes for so long. I wished I could be in this green place in the summer and walk barefoot and feel the mossy earth. I felt there must be so much information available here that we're not taking in, absorbing and understanding in the auguries of the robins that flitted from tree branch to branch beside us, as if following us, or in the glints of the sun that was so brightly golden in the early afternoon's winter sky. It must all be lost, I thought, in a human wearing sunglasses and listening to Bluetooth headphones that obscured the sound and frequency of the birds' chirps that spoke their own language of desire and warning. A hazy line of light was pouring upwards from the ground as if emanating from the earth. The plants and trees like a heat haze one might see on a road on a roasting summer's day. But the earth here was frozen and the hazy energy flowed up in front of us like a barrier that we paused in front of as we approached a narrow clearing that appeared beside a cluster of oak trees hidden by a dipping slope of pine trees all around. I wondered how ancient they must be, as what I was looking at seemed like an arcane grove that somehow survived the cull of empires that sought wood for their ship. Mama Jack silently held up a closed fist, and I stopped beside him. He nodded at a transparent wave of energy that continuously flowed upwards to the sky like a waterfall in reverse. I nodded that I could perceive the sight. He then pointed to a tree that lay on our side of the energy field. It took me a moment to realize he was pointing at a large dragonfly that had landed on a branch and was flexing its four wings in strange synchronized flickers. I thought I'd never seen one so large, and one that remained so still, before belatedly wondering how it could survive in this weather. Weren't they creatures of the spring and summer that would suddenly sprout by bodies of water? In one sudden movement, Mama Jack walked forward and then seemed to pretend to stumble and lurch closer to the creature, while simultaneously swinging the rifle from his shoulders, so the weapon ended up reversed in his hands, allowing the rifle butt to smash against the insect, just as it began to lift off and fail to escape. The creature was crushed with a loud thump and crackle. I stepped cautiously towards the mess on the ground. Mama Jack pulled out a hunter's blade and tore the insect apart to reveal a mess of black wires and silver innards that leaked black goo into the earth. He took a flask of liquid from his backpack and poured it over the remains, and then struck it with something like a flare that caused an instant flash of white smoke that incinerated the remains and turned it into a pile of ash. Mama Jack looked at me and said, "You see, not organic. Quickly, we go now. They know something has entered at this point." I nodded and thought I understood. I had seen how small a drone or spy could be made as we walked through the streaming reverse waterfall of energy. I felt like I had an electric shock tingle through my body for a second that almost made me feel high on some unknown drug. And then we were through into the same forest we had been standing in, but somehow totally different, with all the colours set to a vivid maximum that glowed and gleamed as though every tree and branch and leaf and speckle of falling snow in the landscape was pouring light out from its own inner being. We quietly walked on as I felt a sensation of awesome joy exploding out the top of my skull, like a force that had to be surfed in the moment and was impossible to contain. It began blending my sense impressions of the world with my spiraling mental ideas that attempted to place some structure on what was happening, but whatever I attempted to project melted in the face of constant flow from the ground that passed through us. I felt everything had a distinct aura that was interacting with every other living creature and plant and my own being. I felt like if I could stand still I would dissolve in the constant flow, but realised Mama Jack was firmly tugging me along the ground, with his arm linked around mine, as we passed through a dense passage of foliage, until the forest opened up again towards another sudden dip that held two huge curved stones that left only the narrowest of spaces for us to pass through one at a time. Mama Jack was pushing me on, and I understood I had to get through on my own, but my vision was lost in a million worlds, forming and dissolving in the golden light streaming through the floating fractals of snow that levitated around me like individual worlds to discover, a sight I could have explored for 1,000 years. But I caught the connection of Mama Jack's eyes locking with mine, and I felt I could hear him say I had to keep going. So eventually, somehow, I knelt down and pushed past the two vast curved smooth stones and crawled through a pitch black void. "Long time no see," Emily smiled as I blinked. "You look older," I said before realising how awful it sounded. "Not what every girl wants to hear, but you saw my memories when I was quite a bit younger. And I'm still young," she smiled. "Yes, you are." I nodded and pulled myself up in the bed I found myself in. "Now, I know you'll have a lot of questions, but you have to remember there are only two questions to ask, really. What is a deal with the devil, and what is a deal with God?" "The devil?" I felt myself slowly acclimatizing to a new space as I took in Emily's bright face and the running layers of wood that seemed like a cocoon quietly holding us inside a curving bedroom. What kind of deal do people make with the devil? Emily asked again. Power, wealth, fame? Yes, and the illusion of control over the real world, the natural world. And what would a deal with God be? The opposite? I offered. What would that be? She pressed again. I saw kindness soften the intensity of her gaze towards me. Truth, the truth of everything, as the devil ends up owning your soul. A deal with God would be a deal for the truth, despite all the consequences? Emily asked again. Yes, I nodded. The truth is something that will begin to demolish your life. Is that what you want? I want the truth about where I am and who you are, I replied. And who you are, she repeated. Yes, I think so. Then we can at least tell you what we know and show you with your own eyes the truth of this world and our little corner of it. We walked out of the curved bedroom, which felt like leaving a wooden womb beneath the surface of the earth as we climbed a few steps into the sunlight. I noticed immediately it had stopped snowing and felt much milder than the long trek to the forest. I found myself wondering again how much time had passed. We were in a clearing with a series of cabins that seemed to be made from tents and wood that blended into the earth. As I looked up, the canopy of trees was hung with extra layers of camouflage that was slit in places that allowed shafts of golden light to stream down. I imagined the shape of the settlement must have been like a curving cross from above. It looked like there was around 30 or 40 people busying themselves with the daily tasks of maintaining the clearing. They were rolling barrels of water from one home to another, setting up equipment that looked like meteorological gear, while a few children played with 2 German Shepherd dogs who paused to eye me, but Emily waved them on. What about satellites? I asked, presuming the purpose of this place was privacy. They can only see trees and rocks, she replied. They can't see body heat, and what about drones? What was that mosquito? Yes, Mama Jack told me there was one lurking on the border. They get ever more devious with their machines. This is a very special region. There's a kind of natural frequency in the rocks that blocks signals. Much of the area is just too dense for anything like a phone or radio signal. So you keep that lodge to listen in on the outside world, I asked. Yes, exactly. It's no secret the lodge is there at the top of the valley, but who uses it and for what purpose is rather more ambiguous. But I don't understand how a satellite can't see you. I mean, didn't they say 20 or 30 years ago that they had cameras that could read what was on a carton of cigarettes? What can they see now? And what brand do you smoke? Emily laughed. I don't smoke, though I feel I could start. This isn't all about growing weed, is it? I asked as I took in the place and wondered if this organic space was for crusty refugees or something more complicated. It's not a priority, no. You see, when you find a very special, unique place and combine that with people who are on a different frequency, we are nearly invisible. We blend with the natural harmonics of the earth. I know it sounds strange, but they've never found us. Sometimes drones hover around the border and they get ever more clever, but they can't pass through the barrier. You did okay, so we're all happy to show you around. What would have happened if I couldn't pass through? You would have dropped dead if you had any technology in your body. It's incompatible with the resonant field of energy. Mama Jack kept an eye on you while you slept for a while in the lodge to be sure you weren't carrying anything nasty to share with us. But nobody knows for sure until they try to walk in here if they'll survive. Sometimes people don't know how much heavy metal or hidden critters they're carrying until they try to join us. And what am I joining? I asked. The human race. Emily smiled again as we stopped and looked back on the camp that was cycling through its daily tasks of survival. Have we split? Has it happened? I said in shock, that this was the direction of the conversation. We think it is in progress. In some ways, it's always been like this since the beginning. Humanity splitting into those who create and those who steal. Those who are used for batteries, those who the vampires suck on, and others who radiate out their own energy from the original infinite flowing source. Back in the world of the architects, they are attempting to create a new species that the elitists call Homo Borg Genesis. It's a human hybrid that lacks the VMAT2 gene, what they call the God gene. They believe they can patent this new hybrid's genetic code, and unfortunately, we believe it may be possible that the bodily fluids of this hybrid can self-replicate and infect organic human life. They're trying to wipe out humanity as it was created in God's image. My God, I said to myself. And you called them the elite. I didn't know what to say or think. What would you call them? The powers that be? We cede no power to them. Or should we call them the ruling class? They do not rule us, but they own all the institutions they have created. Do they deserve to be called the elite? No, they are psychopaths and narcissists and completely insane. They are infected with something from another world or reality, but they are the ones attempting to remake the world in their image. They look through a glass darkly and see the horror of free will of the creatures they think are cattle and want their total obedience. Slavery, I said. Yes, Emily agreed. They can't stand that people would freely give their love to one another, to God, whatever the source is that lies beyond this realm. All they can do is invert and pervert and imitate and make humanity their slaves. To make the cattle kneel and bow before them with the God spark rubbed out. They think if they can create a technological singularity that perceives all of reality, they will have achieved technocratic omniscience that grants them the right to own this realm and terraform it for their masters. They are deeply sick, infected, self-hating, delusional. The ruling delusion, I said. Yes, Emily nodded with a sigh. Was I in that lodge to make sure I wasn't carrying anything in my system? It's one of the few ways we have to check. A short quarantine helps us determine if it's safe, but it's still a leap of faith. You asked if I would make a deal with God rather than the devil. I placed my hand against the smooth bark of a tree that I thought was perhaps a poplar. Perhaps we wondered if you would find the cottonwood. Emily smiled somehow sadly and stroked the tree beside me. I wondered if I had been guiding our walk unconsciously. It seemed she hadn't been showing me the encampment at all, but was rather following my attraction to the myriad life that was growing and had been planted like a circle of life around the ancient oak grove that was hidden by the rolling and curving landscape of the pine tree valley. I feel like I should ask if I'm dead, I said, feeling the hardness of the elemental form that seemed undeniably real. All we want is to guarantee our organic process that carries us into the next world without being cheated and shortchanged and turned into the living death of life as a battery plugged into the grid. It's our right and heritage to complete the alchemical work in this life and watch over the next generation with guidance until it is their time and we all finally reach the end of time as it all unfolds beneath the great clock in the sky. Your grandfather knew this, I interrupted. He taught you about the great cycles, but I don't understand what this signal is you're listening for, that Mama Jack had his radio tuned into. Some are waiting for a signal, and some are trying to make contact. Some think it can be done with technology, and some think it can only be done by the right natural frequency. And others think they can make an image or message appear in their mind that will make sense of everything. Some think the signal is for those at the top of the pyramid, and some think it is a neutral field, an objective telephone call that anyone can pick up, and maybe it matters who picks up the phone first. I think there are things to do now on Earth that matter more. And it mattered to bring me here, I asked. What do you want with me, unless I'm just meant to be grateful to be here and saved from the suburban purgatory? I noticed you were sensitive, and I wondered if you'd survive coming here. This was your experiment, or a game. You wondered if I was an alien, or a time traveler, or a robot, or what, a clone. I was shocked that Emily revealed herself to have her own experimental motives. It's never possible to know 100% who is who in this realm, but we found coming here is usually 99.9% effective in determining if someone is organic, sentient, and capable of free will. You see, I need help to travel back through the underground. Everything is connected. All the magical places that flow in the water beneath the ground, that connect every holy well and flow beneath all the places that have landmarks and Masonic buildings built on their energy centres. You remember when I showed you that island in my dream, when you saw my memories and all those goats were running free? I remember. Her words took me back to the sense of the ocean and the land with its towers placed along it like stone junctions. I could feel some indescribable power emanating in the thought of those old places. I need help to travel back. There are things we need to do to break all illusions, she said, turning away, somehow unable to explain everything without sharing something terrible. And you wanted to know if I would do a deal with God rather than the devil, to know the truth, because the truth is a tower that destroys your old life. I asked, finally feeling I understood. Yes, she said, and took my hand. You think I'm one of you? I asked. You see these trees we know as poplars? Emily paused to run her finger along the cold branch of the bare tree. They'll be beautiful in the spring. The buds are shaped like 5-pointed stars that will emerge when the season changes. The female poplars give birth to cotton-like seeds that will fill the air with tiny little magical stars. Now they're still sleeping in their branches through the winter. If you broke one of these branches, you'd see a 5-pointed star like they were home to star seeds. In North America, they call them cottonwood. The Lakota and Sioux tribes believed they held a great spirit whom they called Wankantanka, the Great Mystery. They saw the quality of stars in this being, a great standing one who connected the earth with the sky. They would do a sundance ceremony to bring everybody together to mark the time of regeneration every year. Many tribal people believed they came from the stars. When the wagon trains were travelling west, the pioneers would be relieved to know the sight of cottonwoods meant they would be near water and could rest. They would give their animals the leaves to eat and learned you could make herbal tea. You could make a balm of Gilead from the fragrant buds of the tree. It's anti-inflammatory with antifungal and antimicrobial properties. In the American Revolution, they realised you could eat the inner bark of slippery elm and survive on it as a gruel, and then realised it was another natural medicine that helped many things. Think of all the knowledge the herbalists had to make remedies from the natural world all around us, until our healthcare and medicine became a byproduct of the petrochemical industry, and all the naturopaths were chased out of business by the Rockefellers. Think of all the people we give our unthinking trust to who never deserved it, I said. Yes, Emily agreed. We never stopped to think about anything in our induction and indoctrination. We just all went along with the program. I wish you could see how majestic these trees are in bloom. Many of the tribes like the Hopi and the Pueblo and the Navajo knew it as a medicine tree. They'd carve out the roots for kachina dolls and masks and things they'd use in ceremonies. They knew how to carve out dugout canoes. They knew the resin could be used as a sticky glue. They knew the buds could be turned into a yellow dye. The girls would pick up the leaves and whistle to imitate bird calls. We've lost so much, and all we see now is the end result of our total alienation, that our homes now are machines to live in, how everything that makes our lives more convenient and easy removes us from the inherent meaning and correspondence of the natural world. We were all tribal people at one time before we came into contact with the machine. I thought out loud. Maybe the last people to try and escape were those at the Battle of Wounded Knee, when people were told they couldn't have their own songs, their own stories, and own language. They had nothing left to lose and were slaughtered, a battle between the United States Army and women and children, and the ghost dance echoes for us all. And my own people, my ancestors, lost their language and learned English, the language of control and commerce. And we all became good citizen consumers of the globalist grid, with all instructions downloaded from the mainframe into our phone. No need to think anymore, just update the latest instructions like a living nightmare, a horror movie for us to choose a part to cosplay in. But I have to believe there's hope and healing all around us if we can remember we are a part of this divine creation. Emily sighed as we quietly strolled on to keep warm. Everything is upside down and we know what they want to do. A panopticon for the gullible to feel everything is nice and fair and safe, I offered. It's worse than that, Emily said. They don't want to just create an all-seeing digital eye. They want to turn human beings into an antenna to absorb all their dirty electricity, and the gullible and ignorant will be told how efficient and green it is to resonate with the power grid and forget they were ever a child of nature resonating with the earth. You know, Mama Jack asked me if I understood why I had 5 fingers. I changed the tone and subject of the conversation as I thought this was as good an opportunity as any to learn something more about these strange people I felt were converting me without explaining exactly who they were. He has his own sense of humour. People always think he's very serious because he's really a technical person, you know? Not user-friendly, Emily replied. There's this new age idea that we're all moving towards the 5D and that the 4D is the astral world or the world of thought forms and ideas, and this world we're moving about in is the 3D. But what the delusional elitists seem to want is for us to merge with an artificial world of information, which sounds like a form of 5D reality. What if we're supposed to be moving back towards the source? What if we're meant to get back to being a 1D creature in harmony with the ultimate creation before we came down here? It's not a popular view, Emily said suddenly with a serious face that burnt away the aura of her youth. You would have to know how to let go of all attachments, to break all contracts, and let go of all the illusions of this world. You would have to know how to exist without playing any of the games and stop making food for any of those invisible critters in other dimensions and frequencies. You think it's something real. There are humans and robots and possibly clones and time travelers and aliens, and maybe they're all here at this point in time to be a witness to something. And we're witnesses to it too, but we haven't realized at this great point of bifurcation of the human race, this splitting of the path where we're all choosing consciously or unconsciously how to live and what new earth we're going to co-create, well, whatever about the creatures we can't really perceive we do know, well, are pretty sure that the aliens are us from the future who have come back to witness this point in history, to see where it all went wrong or right, as some want our DNA to reintegrate and use us to save themselves. But that time is now. When we go deeper into matter, into technology, or remember who we are, remember the ultimate truth, I tried to understand. Yes, Emily nodded and tightly held my hand and raised it up in the air so we shared a joint fist between our faces. The ultimate truth of the ultimate event can only be perceived when you let go of all beliefs, to see the world, reality for what it is, a shadow on the wall of the cave. Then what does it matter what we do? You have a community here and you want what? To go back and save people in the cave who loved their slavery? I demanded from her, and she let go of my hand and walked around me in a semicircle. I'd like to just daydream in the shade of a summer's tree and let go of the grip of my mind, but I can't let go of my perception. I keep perceiving. I am like you, a witness to all this great mystery and madness, and our duty is to those who find us and those who are still innocent, and we can't hide here forever. It's only a chance to catch our breath. While we wait for a meteor shower or a phone call, I asked, though regretted sounding sarcastic. We are at the precipice of a great unveiling, and it is one that nobody expects. The worst horrors are advertised like coming attractions, so we know those are the ones that will never come to pass. All we have found are some doorways and entrances and rabbit holes we're obliged to explore because of who we are, and what is dormant in us is awakening. Your grandfather gave you his knowledge because he knew the timing would be in our lifetime, not his, and we're left to find our way. I began to understand the small, subtle part of this experience. Yes, we will complete the connection and lay the thread for the future that still has to happen, despite everything being absurd, or destined, or prophesized. I still have a job to do, and you can help me, but for now we're still human, and we should join the others for food, and not carry the weight of the world. We're here to learn to surf all the frequencies, not just know there are illusions to hide in and delusions to drive us mad. Come, let us leave the little stars. Will you eat with us? I silently nodded and followed her as she guided me away from the cottonwood trees. Beneath the pure, inky black sky of a new moon night, pin-pricked with the pure lights of the Little Dipper and a billion more stars in a sky free of electric illumination, we went back to the warmth of the people preparing their communal meal, with a feeling of gratitude for this time, place and space to rest before a new day began again.